where I think that cannabis is a bellwether issue. It's at the tipping point on the revolution of common sense, where I feel that Republicans and liberals and moderates and those who just don't give a damn about partisan politics at all know in their hearts, know very well that when we commit such precious resources to an illegal war abroad like in Iraq, where we siphon away precious funds away from states or municipalities where they struggle to keep on top of the social service needs, try to keep on top of addressing what often, and even here in San Francisco, even in my district, the spikes of gun violence and homicides that ravage communities. And then we have to justify that those same dollars used in the criminal justice system are the same dollars spent to prosecute those who use marijuana. It doesn't make sense at all. And we know very well within the visceral response, and you'll hear from many scholars here today and advocates who make a very strong and compelling case. Quite frankly, it's an unimpeachable case that we cannot in this country afford what I consider just the retarded decision of bad policy making that in order to subvert our ability to manage our governments locally. I cannot endorse any candidate here in San Francisco, whether it would be city attorney, district attorney, or public defender, who would advocate for any reversal of a lenient trend towards, how we treat those who use marijuana. It makes no sense whatsoever. But that's San Francisco. The question is, what are you going to do in your own cities? What are you going to do in those swing states that tip from blue to red and red to blue again? What pressure is being applied in areas that you shouldn't really take for granted, like an area of the Bay Area in Northern California or Santa Monica and Los Angeles? What are you going to do in places where those politicians feel that they absolutely have to cater to the old ideals that are so stultified and stodgy that it's what makes their own local governments and frankly their own state and federal governments appear obsolete, while other nations abroad just completely outdistance us in their smart thinking reforms of how to deal with the decriminalization of drug use altogether. It requires the same kind of political pressure as you would in any campaign to treat it as if you want my vote, you want my support, you pony up. You can't get elected in San Francisco if you're for the death penalty, and you certainly can't get elected in San Francisco if you're going to be for the prosecution of cannabis use, especially medical cannabis use. That should be the kind of bellwether that should be deployed wherever we are, no matter what conservative stronghold here in the United States. And the kind of laws that we pass here were only meant to be a template, not one that's supposed to be original just to the boundaries of San Francisco, but one that we hope that would at least permeate the kind of logic and sensibility that no matter where you are in the United States, conservative or liberal, that you adopt with compassionate understanding and smart public policy sort of vision, that we want to create an infrastructure where we already know exists. It's underground. It is before us. It is in front of us. But as soon as we, with love, adopt through the mainstream process the understanding and administration through local government and state government, the practice of cannabis usage, we will be a much better country for it. Thank you for the award.
Hey Ross, I need to have your mother call my mother, okay? Please. Well, another reason I'd like to thank Ross and what makes him so dynamic is that he breaks the bipolarity up. But he is a Green Party candidate, candidate holder, policy holder, office holder. And so he really breaks that mold. He's one of the highest elected Green Party officials in the country. And really, frankly speaking, Democrats and Republicans pox on both their houses regarding marijuana prohibition. And it's really third parties that are likely candidates and people like Ross that are leading the way. So bless him for doing what he's done here. my remarks, we're going to run about 15 or 20 minutes, and I have some very quick thanks for everybody who comes out to these. We put the flag out, and 300, 400, 500 people come out to the NORML conference. Certainly have to thank the key NORML staff, Karen Maliver and Jessica Gosshorn, and Keith Straub, obviously, and Paul Armentano, the stage managers, all the people that staff the tables and the doors. They all volunteer. Nick Timish does the media. Chris Goldstein is doing podcasting and audio. And of course, Chad Ray for years has been doing the DVD recordings. And we have 70+ speakers that come every year for no fee and speak at the NORML conference. And we can't do it without your help. Lastly, a special thanks, to, of course, to High Times and all the vendors that help financially get this off the ground every year. The poet Oliver Wendell Holmes, about 110 years ago, said, "It is the province of knowledge to speak, and it is the privilege of wisdom to listen." And so for me, I spend a lot of the year talking and representing the marijuana law reform movement at the macro level. So for me, conference is a time to listen. It's time to listen to the speakers, and it's a time to talk to people and network in the hall. So my remarks, while could run easily an hour and talking about all the different things that NORML's about, I'm just going to touch upon basically two topics. One is a brief report card over the last year, and two is to look at the three, I believe there are three major hurdles left to reform marijuana laws. And those hurdles are, the public in the US generally perceives marijuana as immoral. Parents, if they are the problem, their education is the answer. And stakeholders must get energized. The question is, and Steve Dillon alluded to this in his remarks, the question is, will it take another major incursion by the government in stakeholders' lives and the lives of their families to move them to resolute action, to protest, to be involved in the political process? I've got a prime and very recent example to show you in just a moment. A report card. Please see the CD-ROM that was given out. My remarks in there are from the November Drug Policy Alliance conference, which was terrific, and I commend anybody, if you can go to a Drug Policy Alliance conference, to go. But my remarks speak to basically two major issues within that, and that is that the support for marijuana law reform, both funding and in the population, is still too narrow, it's too shallow, and that we have to be better strategic thinkers. And I'm pretty frank in my analysis there, and I commend you to those remarks. Last year was my first year as NORML's director. I'm the 8th director of NORML since its founding in 1970 by Keith Straub. And I kept my hair. I didn't pop any crowns on my molars, so I'm going to count that as a good year. We got through the year. But it was only possible because many caring and selfless individuals make this possible. And many goals were accomplished, and the bar has been set even higher for this coming year. And some of the things that we said we were going to do last year, here's a quick review. We seek to continue to diversify the organization. If you look around the room here, once again, there is virtually no African Americans here. In fact, I see none. And there are probably no more than 2 to 3 Hispanic, Latino. So this movement is not diversified enough in this country to effectively change the laws. And it's a pox on all of our houses. And this is something that I go to bed every night thinking, how do we better diversify the organization and the law reform movement? I think it's happening more so with women than it is with minorities, but this too has to change. There has to be a greater representation of women in law reform at the leadership level, to be sure. In that vein, half of NORML staff is now women. We added another NORML board member this year, Danielle Schumacher, and we're happy to have her as the youth seat on NORML's board. We actively seek grants to diversify the organization. Also, too, financial accountability and transparency. You go to the NORML webpage and see the last 3 years of all of NORML's finances as reported to the federal government. And this is something that I think a lot of drug policy groups would be advised to do, is to have some transparency about your finances, how you spend the money, how you strategize. And we strive towards new communications and education technologies, video blogging, HTML-based list serving, top-of-the-line legislative software, and podcasting. The NORML podcast is remarkably popular.